Hi, I'm Tom Blomane. Welcome to this special edition of Graffiti. We're here in Test Pattern in downtown Scranton, where we're taking down the show called Reflections on the Vietnam War, which is an exhibit of local Vietnam War veterans' images and photographs they had taken during that conflict. I'm going to read some poems today that I had written inspired by this show, the first one of which is called 30 Years Back in the World. Fair-haired and blue-eyed and white, from the blue and white sky, green and black towns of northeastern Pennsylvania, a universe away from the green and brown bloodbath paths through the maze of Southeast Asia, they put on the required faces and became invaders. 30 years later, they gather in a tiny gallery displaying pictures they had taken 13,000 miles from Scranton and lifetimes of just yesterday, from lost bits of limbs and eyes and bits of psyche to explain to classes of youngsters how it was to be so young in these photographs, in bad jungles with beer cans and machine guns. What is peace? Red painted on a door, or the bandaged face of a torn boy, all neatly matted and framed for display, before we all forget lessons we've already forgotten, to background music we continue to enjoy in our bloodless routines, complaining about the difficulty of finding nearby parking on the street. We do not see the images burned in their memories of mouths screaming and grinning rats, nor feel bayonets slipping between ribs, or hear that twig snap of a neck, or the odd language of horror from those our nation believed we had to kill to save from some fate worse than death. Listen to the echo from the green age of these gray boys and imagine the tingle of a missing leg, the eternal view of bodies in the dirt, a desperate hurt there is no good medicine for, a cage you pace in forever. This poem is called Recognition in Reflections. Is it our own face we see in these framed photographs, not just those of our hometown boys resting amid misleading green between horrors that became routine to them during their tours, but also in the illegible expressions of these Asians who needed to be saved from domination, from chores, sifting rice, riding a bicycle, hugging a deadpan child, watching strange giants go by? Do we see again the pressing need for free market exchange? Vague new demons to blame? Their pagodas given swastikas to win hearts and minds? The Budweiser crowns on mountains of tin we showed them how to build? And there, left along a path somewhere, the carcass of a man, his face obscured. Can we still see him? This poem is called Crime Scene. It was actually illegal to take pictures of the enemy dead for a military guy to take pictures of the enemy dead, and this is a poem about that crime scene. The crime wasn't to kill them, but to commit their corpses to film. The torn and twisted body of a brave and nameless enemy brought home astray on an undeveloped role in the heavy baggage of a tortured boy. Unable, even decades later, to assuage this military sin of death captured by lens, he still could not surrender himself to destroy the image of an unknown and otherwise forgotten dead foe, and somehow strange friend. This poem is called Conscription, which is kind of a reflection of my age, having missed the Vietnam conflict by a few years, and growing up in the milieu of that time. Conscription. I remember playing with soldiers and guns even before I learned how G.I. Joe could kick in the door of my sister's little Barbie house, take Ken out with a single shot, and have some fun with the blonde on the toy's plastic floor. I recall later taping red M80s to the action figures' torsos and blowing them apart out in the yard behind the garage. I didn't get caught until I had already killed them all. I recollect our first color TV showing our guys machine gunning what were called the VC, over folding dinner trays in the den, and something about Johnson and escalation, which turned out to mean someone named Nixon. And then I was getting nearly old enough to go myself and imagined in the shower how kids my sister's age were really there in that strange and distant place, and how some of them just weren't anymore. I heard how thousands were having free love in the streets against the war, which sounded nice, and I admired the tie-dyed dress, the hair, and peace signs, but never confessed the Barbie rape secret to anyone. Everyone knew I killed the men with bombs, but not what had gone on before. I reminisce now how I sat in the woods with stolen beer alone before the grim fear of a real draft card arrived. By then, I knew what I was capable of, given the resources, victims, and circumstances. I knew what my innocence became. But fortunately, the situation had changed by that time, and they no longer required any more of my kind. These years later, in the leisure to have become so painfully tame, I consider the dead they built the black wall for, who probably all had similarities in their brief histories, common twists of youth's vague rage. I believe they might have favored better enemies too, at least than those left to the gray definitions of politicians and memory and age. This poem's called A Rat's Feast, based on a story Tom Munley told me, who was a combat veteran of Vietnam, about a rat actually chewing on the foot of a soldier in his platoon. A rat's feast. The feet, not offered, but taken from the week's wet boots, propped on a sopped log during a brief respite from the slow and ceaseless walking through jungle and mud with bugs and dead and enemies. The young corporal gazed in disbelief at the surreal feast being made of the joking soldier's foot. Used to death and wounds by age 19, and far past the stage of being green and even pain in this green and painful place, and clearly without the common primal rodent fear by now, the boy laughed and showed his comrades how the brazen rat, big as a cat back home, calmly ate the flesh and blood of his soul. I'm Tom Blomain. Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Graffiti. See ya.